Chapter 4. The Letter and the Silence. The silence between them stretched into weeks. At first, Claire convinced herself it was temporary, that Ethan just needed a few days to cool off after the breakup. But by the second week, when his name no longer popped up on her phone and every conversation with mutual friends came with a careful pause, she knew. This time, he wasn't just pulling back. He was gone. She saw the proof in the little things. How he stopped forwarding her stupid tweets or tagging her in memes only they would laugh at. Their shared playlists went untouched. The coffee place on 3rd Street, their place, became a spot she walked past with her head down. The worst part? She couldn't even blame him. Not really. Claire told herself that Lena was right to walk away, and if Ethan needed space to figure things out, maybe she should give it to him. She'd been selfish for thinking she could just hold him at arm's length forever, loving him silently, hoping things would never change. But now that they had, she realized she'd been playing a game she never had a chance of winning. One night, with rain streaking down her windows and everything inside her aching, she did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote him a letter. Ethan, I know you probably won't read this. Honestly, I'm not sure I'll ever send it. But I have to say it. Just once, if only for myself. I'm in love with you. I think I've known it for years, maybe since college. Maybe since that time you stayed up with me all night before my thesis defense, or the night we watched that terrible horror movie and you held my hand even though I wasn't scared. I never said anything because I didn't want to lose what we had. I thought keeping quiet was safer. But silence has its own consequences, doesn't it? I watched you fall for Lena. I tried to be happy for you, and for a while I think I convinced myself that I was. But the truth is, it hurt. It's still hurting. I don't expect anything from you. I don't need you to love me back. I just wanted you to know that it was never unspoken because it wasn't real. It was unspoken because I was afraid. And now, I think I have to let you go. I hope you find what you're looking for. Love, Claire. She folded it once and tucked it in the back of her journal. She never addressed it, never sealed it, but writing it felt like exhaling after holding her breath for years. The next morning, she packed a small bag, left her phone charging on her kitchen counter, and boarded a bus out of the city. No dramatic farewell, no note, just distance. For a weekend, maybe more. She needed to breathe where Ethan wasn't. Meanwhile, Ethan had barely been breathing at all. Lena had ended things officially 2 weeks ago. There were no raised voices, no accusations, just tired eyes and an understanding that the space between them wasn't shrinking. It was growing by the day, and Claire's name lived too comfortably in the middle of it. She never even told you how she felt, Lena had said as she left, her voice low but pointed. And yet, she's the one you can't stop thinking about. That should tell you something. He hadn't stopped replaying that moment since. He missed Claire. That much was undeniable. But he didn't know how to reach out, didn't know what to say. Not after the storm he'd let Lena weather alone. Not after the mess he'd made of all of it. So he did nothing. And the nothing grew heavy. Until one afternoon, Hannah cornered him in a cafe, coffee in one hand, sharp concern in the other. "You're being a jackass," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. Ethan blinked. "Nice to see you too." "I mean it," she said. "Claire's been walking around like a ghost, and you've just disappeared. You broke up with Lena and decided what? Claire deserves to be punished for something she never even did." Ethan stiffened. "I'm not punishing her." "Then what are you doing?" He looked down at his cup. Hannah leaned forward. "She never acted on anything. She stayed silent for your sake. And now you're treating her like she ruined something that was already falling apart on its own." Ethan swallowed hard. "I didn't know how to face her." "You didn't want to admit what you felt," Hannah corrected. "And maybe you still don't. But you need to figure it out, because if you let her go without saying anything, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Something cracked open in him then, not a thunderclap, but a clean split, like truth pouring through after a long drought. He stood abruptly. "Where is she?" Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Not at her place. She left for the weekend, didn't say where, just told me she needed space." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, panic flooding in. "And you let her go?" Hannah scoffed. "She's not a child, Ethan, and maybe space is the only reason she hasn't completely shattered." Ethan didn't argue. But he did leave, because suddenly he couldn't stand another second of not seeing her, not telling her what had been clawing at his chest since the night Lena asked that impossible question. If Claire told you she loved you, what would you do? Now he knew. He'd go find her, even if it meant running through every street, every memory, every mistake. He'd find her. Chapter 5. What Was Always There? Claire didn't mean to end up in the small lakeside town. She just needed somewhere still. Somewhere without memories of Ethan folded into every sidewalk and subway stop. So she booked a room in a quiet bed and breakfast 2 hours north and spent her days walking the wooded trails and trying to forget what it felt like to lose something you never truly had. It was strange, the kind of grief that didn't come from a breakup or a betrayal, but from silence, from all the things she never said. And yet, she felt lighter here. Not because she'd moved on. God, no, but because for the first time she'd said the words to herself, written them down. Acknowledged that her love for Ethan was real and deep and not something she could keep folding into friendship like it didn't cost her something every single day. That morning she sat by the lake wrapped in her coat, watching the water shift beneath the breeze. Her journal lay open on her lap, blank page waiting. She didn't know what to write. What was left after everything? She didn't hear the footsteps until they were right behind her. Claire, the sound of her name, his voice, cracked through the quiet like a thunderclap. She turned, stunned. Ethan? His hair was windblown, his eyes tired. He looked like he'd been running, and in a way, he had. She stood slowly, heart thundering. What are you doing here? I had to find you, he said breathlessly. I didn't know where else to go. You found me, she whispered, still unable to process it. How? Hannah. She said you mentioned needing stillness. I figured if I were you, I'd find a lake. Claire laughed, sharp and disbelieving, because of course he would know that. Of course he'd understand her that way. He stepped closer. I've been a coward. Ethan? No, let me say this. His voice shook. You didn't ruin anything. You've never ruined anything. I've been walking around in this fog thinking I was just confused or heartbroken or lost. But the truth is, I think I've been in love with you for years. Her breath caught. I didn't recognize it, he said, because it wasn't loud or messy. It didn't sweep me off my feet. It just was. It was you. It felt like breathing, like home. Tears blurred her vision. I thought love was supposed to feel like fireworks, he went on. But maybe it's this quiet thing that's been steady all along. You've been the constant. You've been it, Claire. She looked at him, finally letting the words that had been buried for so long rise to the surface. I love you, she said, her voice shaking. I've loved you since before I even knew what that meant, and I thought I'd missed my chance. His eyes softened. You didn't. There was silence then, not the painful kind they'd sat in lately, but that let things settle. They didn't rush toward each other. No sweeping kiss. Just standing, facing each other honestly for the first time in years. Claire looked down at her hands. I was so scared I'd lose you, that saying it out loud would break what we had. Ethan's voice was gentle. Maybe it had to break a little so it could become something new. She let out a shaky breath. How do we even start? Slowly, he said. Honestly. Carefully. We don't have to rush. I just know I don't want to go another day pretending you're only my best friend. A beat passed. Then Claire smiled, small and real and glowing through her tears. Okay, she said. Let's try. And that was it. No grand declarations on rooftops, no cinematic orchestra, just two people choosing each other. Not because the timing was perfect, but because the love had never really left. It had just waited. Patiently. The best love stories don't always begin with lightning. Sometimes they begin with friendship, with years of laughter and shared coffee orders and bad reality TV, with a confession that came too late and a love that arrived right on time. Claire had never been more aware of how ridiculous her life had become than the moment she stood in aisle 9 of a hardware store, holding a power drill she absolutely did not know how to use, while her boyfriend loudly debated cabinet knobs with a 78-year-old woman named Doris. I'm telling you, the brushed brass gives it a vintage vibe, Ethan was saying, holding up a knob like it was a priceless artifact. Doris squinted at it. It gives it a grandma's powder room vibe. Claire stifled a snort. She's not wrong. Ethan looked betrayed. Et tu, brute? Claire grinned. I'm just saying, if we're renovating the kitchen, maybe we don't want it to scream Regency Core Nursing Home. He clutched his heart. You wound me. You'll live, she said, pecking his cheek and tossing the brass knob back into the bin. They ended up choosing matte black handles, not because either of them particularly loved them, but because Doris gave them a coupon and threatened to haunt them if they chose anything else. A year had passed since that weekend by the lake. Since Claire confessed her love and Ethan confessed his slowly realized, long-ignored love right back. And while the moment had been soft and sweet and emotionally cinematic, the actual relationship since then, beautiful, but also messy and very, very real. They fought over thermostat settings. Ethan alphabetized his spices, which Claire found both deeply unhinged and mildly sexy. Claire had a habit of talking to her plants like they were coworkers, and Ethan had walked in on her scolding a ficus more than once. They learned to navigate space and silence and everything in between. They weren't perfect, but they were honest and happy. On the way home from the hardware store, Claire rested her feet on the dash, sipping an iced coffee Ethan had surprised her with, her eyes scanning the receipt for things she didn't remember agreeing to buy. You realize we're still probably going to burn the lasagna tonight, she said. Ethan glanced over. I have faith in us. You said that before we tried to build the IKEA bookshelf. We survived that, barely. Claire smirked. You cried. It was one screw, Claire, one missing screw. She laughed so hard she snorted, and he reached over to squeeze her hand, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist like it was still a novelty to touch her like this. They pulled up to the house, a little rental they were slowly turning into a home. Claire stepped out of the car and stretched. Ethan came around to meet her, stopping her with a hand on her waist. Hey, he said, voice softer. She raised an eyebrow. Hey? He looked at her like he still couldn't believe he got to. I know we make fun of everything and we're barely adults with power tools, but this year with you has been the best one of my life. Claire's teasing smile melted. Yeah, she whispered. Me too. He kissed her then, not because it was timed or dramatic or necessary for closure, just because it was Tuesday, because she was there, because he loved her. And somewhere Claire thought back to that letter she never sent, the one where she said she hoped he found what he was looking for. Turns out, he did. So did she. They just needed a little heartbreak, a few missed chances, and a woman named Doris to get there. Thanks for reading The Confession Came Too Late. If you felt the heartbreak, laughed at Doris, or rooted for Claire and Ethan from the very beginning, I've got more love stories where that came from. Stories with slow burns, emotional twists, messy relationships, and the kind of endings that feel earned. Subscribe or follow to get updates on upcoming stories, bonus scenes, and behind-the-scenes looks into characters you've grown to love. Because the best love stories, they're never perfect, but they're real. Stay tuned and stay in love.